brought up the defendants, Joseph
At this
Guilfoyle.
Ministry of Defence establishment, scientists have been researching the effects of stress on human behaviour. Their work is classified top secret, and only 2 people who've been inside Huckstone Edge have ever spoken publicly about what goes on there. One of them, a former Army corporal, Louis Tucker, gave an interview to The Outsider, a radical magazine. The other, who worked as a laboratory technician at Huckstone Edge, is Joseph Guilfoyle, who is on trial in the Crown Court today, charged with passing on secret documents. In the dock with him is Robert McBride, a reporter for The Outsider magazine, charged with receiving those documents. Both men plead not guilty.
All stand. All persons having anything to do before my lords, the Queen's justices, draw near and give your attendance.
The case you're about to see is fictional. The procedure, however, is legally accurate. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the general public.
Members of the jury, there are 2 charges against each of these men. There is the lesser charge, if you like, a technical charge, that they communicated official secrets. I don't think this should be very hard to prove. But then there is a more serious charge, that they communicated secrets for a purpose prejudicial to the safety or interests of the state. As I say, this is a more serious charge. The penalty could be up to 14 years in prison. But it is the charge under Section 1 of the Official Secrets Act which the prosecution considers to be appropriate in this case.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. David Minchell, Detective Inspector, Special Branch.
Inspector Minchell, when did you first take an official interest in the defendant, Robert McBride?
That would be July last year, when I was detailed to investigate a report from a security officer at the Ministry of Defence that one of their scientists had been approached by a reporter asking questions about his work, which was classified. The reporter in question was McBride. The scientist was Dr Harold Pascoe, who is head of Huckstone Edge Research Centre, which is a restricted area under the Official Secrets Act.
Dr Pascoe will be called to give evidence, my lord.
Yes?
Please go on, Inspector.
Well, we took no official action at that stage, other than keeping a discreet eye on McBride and his newspaper. The next thing really was a report in The Outsider about Huckstone Edge, edition of August the 4th.
May this be Exhibit 1, my lord. I have copies for yourself and for the members of the jury. Is that the article in question, Inspector?
Yes.
You will see that it is headed Brainwashed by the British Army. And it continues on the inside pages. Perhaps to save time, you could summarise for us the reasons why you took an official interest in this story.
Well, as you can see, the article quotes, or claims to quote, a Mr. Louis Tucker. It says that Tucker was a corporal in the army and he volunteered in 1979 for treatment at Huckstone Edge Research Centre. He was discharged from the army for medical reasons and he's now trying to claim compensation for injuries he reckons he suffered while he was in the army. Well, that's fair enough, but we've got Tucker here apparently describing secret research, what he calls experiments in mind control and interrogation techniques to a left-wing newspaper. In fact, he makes the place sound like some Gestapo torture chamber. In my view, it constituted a breach of the Official Secrets Act.
After the article was published, Inspector, did you take any action?
No official action. The article wasn't followed up by any other papers, and I think the general feeling was that this was just another typical bit of left-wing rubbish that was better ignored. We did pay a visit to Mr. Tucker and reminded him of his position as regards the Official Secrets Act. As a former member of the armed services, of course, he's not entitled to talk about information that he obtained through his position in the forces. And we continue to keep a discreet eye on McBride's movements and activities.
Can we now turn to the events of October the 9th last year? Will you describe what happened on that day?
Yes, sir. If I might consult my notebook, my lord.
Are there any objections, Mr. Deakins?
No objections, my lord.
Very well.
At 6:15 p.m. on that day, I received a phone call from the security officer at Huckstone Edge to say that certain documents were missing, believed stolen. On the basis of what he told me, I went with my colleague, Sergeant Stevens, to an address in Blackpool Gardens, Fulchester, the home of the accused, Joseph Peter Guilfoyle. Guilfoyle's wife told us that he was at a public house called the Lamb and Flag. We went there and apprehended both Guilfoyle and McBride as they were leaving the premises. That was at 10 o'clock. They were searched and the missing documents were found in the inside of McBride's jacket. They were then cautioned and taken to Fulchester Police Headquarters.
Did either of the accused at this stage make any statement?
Yes, Guilfoyle made a written statement.
Exhibit 2, Lord.
Is this evidence disputed? Thank you.
It is not disputed, my lord.
Very well. Will you read it to us, Inspector?
Statement of Joseph Peter Guilfoyle, October 10th, Fulchester Police Headquarters. I am employed by the Ministry of Defence as a laboratory technician. On October 5th last, I was approached by Robert McBride, who said he was a friend of Dr Kennelly, my boss. He said he was helping a man called Louis Tucker to claim compensation from the government, and he asked me if I would help also. I said Tucker had been a patient at Huckstone Edge, where I work, and there were various notes about him in the files there which would help his case. He asked me to borrow the file overnight so that he could look at it. I agreed to do this. On October 9th, I took Tucker's file from a cabinet in the office of Dr Monk. The cabinet was not locked. I took the file to the Lamb and Flag, where I had arranged to meet McBride. He asked to take it to his office to copy part of it. I said I wasn't happy about this, but he insisted and left the pub taking the file with him. I followed him out, intending to get it back. Before I could get it back off him, we were arrested. I want to make it clear that I was not offered any money for taking the file. Signed, J.P. Guilfoyle.
There is no dispute about this document?
There is no dispute, my lord. But I would ask the jury to bear in mind that it was made in the middle of the night. It is timed at 4:20 a.m. And it was made without the benefit of legal advice.
Quite so. Do go on, Mr. Fry.
Lord, I should like at this stage to ask that the rest of the case be heard in camera. I'm proposing to touch upon matters concerning the operations of the security services, as well as classified matters relating to the Ministry of Defence.
Very well. I must now ask members of the press and everyone in the public gallery if they'll please leave the court.
Well, now, Inspector Minshall, let me turn to the question of Mr. McBride. Is he, from your observation, simply a campaigning journalist, or is he something else?
No. He's not just an ordinary journalist. I am quite satisfied that McBride is an agent of the Polish intelligence service, which, as you may know, is indirectly controlled by Soviet intelligence.
Inspector, do you have evidence for this extraordinary assertion?
The evidence is circumstantial, my lord, but I think extremely strong. Incidentally, I did say an agent of Polish intelligence, not an officer. Agents are normally nationals of the country in which they operate, and McBride is part of a network controlled through a cutout, that is to say, a sort of go-between, and headed ultimately by a Polish intelligence officer. The cutout is, or was, a man called John Seymour Upton, and he's been well known to us for a number of years also. He was involved in the publication of the magazine The Outsider and active in various other radical and subversive organisations. He provided the capital to set up the magazine, and shortly after McBride's arrest, he went to the Republic of Ireland and has remained there ever since.
My lord, these are a series of unsubstantiated allegations against a man who is not here to defend himself.
Mr. Fry, I understand your concern to demonstrate a link between the defendant, McBride, and the Foreign Intelligence Service. But I must ask you to confine the witness to the evidence of his own observation. We don't want to hear about a lot of reports that he may have read in secret files.
As your lordship pleases.
Yeah.
Very well, Inspector. Can you demonstrate from your own observation a link between McBride and this man, John Seymour Upton?
In the course of the surveillance of both these men, which covered a period of more than 3 months, I personally saw them meet together on a number of occasions. I can supply details of dates, times and places if there's any argument about that.
We'll discover shortly, I suppose, whether that's disputed. And now, Inspector, can you demonstrate again from your own observations a link between John Seymour Upton and the Polish Intelligence Service?
Yes. Well, as I say, Upton is well known to us, and on August the 23rd he made a phone call to a house in Gypsy Hill, South London, and I've heard a recording of the call. He left a telephone message on an answering machine, which was as follows. This is Pinner. I've got a message for Chris. Tell him we've tried the woman and she won't cooperate, so we'll bash on with the alternative arrangement. Well, the message itself, it didn't tell us very much. It could be about almost anything, but the significant thing was that the house Upton called is listed on our files as a drop, That is to say, a sort of post-restant address, provided by the Poles for the benefit of their clandestine operatives.
Really, my lord, must we listen to any more of this third-hand MI5 tittle-tattle? There is no hard evidence against this man Upton, and there is nothing to suggest that his relationship with my client was anything other than professional and above board. This entire alleged spying connection is nothing more than a crude smear.
Well, the wording of the 1920 Official Secrets Act obliges me to admit evidence of alleged links with persons suspected of being foreign agents, Mr. Deacon.
Surely, the persons reasonably suspected, my lord.
In due course, I shall make my own views known about what constitutes reasonable suspicion. Yes?
Just one more question, Inspector. What significance do you attach to the names Pinner and Chris used in that telephone call?
Pinner is the work name, or alias, of John Seymour Upton. Chris is, or was, the work name of a Polish intelligence officer called Andrzej Golubiewski, who, at the time, was working out of the London embassy under diplomatic cover. He was listed as a cultural attaché. He controlled Upton, and Upton controlled McBride.
Thank you, Inspector.
Inspector Minshall, you are a member of the Special Branch. And what is special about this branch of the police force is that it combats subversion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would you say that The Outsider was a subversive publication?
I would, yes.
In that case, I should be very interested to learn your definition of subversive.
Subversive? I'd say a subversive is someone who aims to overthrow the government.
Oh, Inspector! Anyone who votes in a general election can be said to have the intention of overthrowing the government. There must be more to it than that.
I should have said aims to overthrow the government by force.
Ah! Now, Inspector, can you refer me to any issue of The Outsider wherein it is stated, either directly or implicitly, that it seeks to overthrow the government by force?
Not right this minute, no. I'm talking about their general tendency, their political outlook. It's completely communist, revolutionary.
Yes, but on what basis do you say that it is a communist newspaper? Surely it is a radical and anti-establishment sort of newspaper.
It's very left-wing, believe me.
Oh. Is that why you keep an eye on its staff?
Yes.
That why you follow them, eavesdrop on their conversations, open their letters, tap their telephones, simply because you don't like their brand of politics?
No, it's because they represent a threat to national security.
In your opinion, do you undertake the surveillance of every journalist who seeks to interview a senior civil servant?
No, of course not.
No, but you did in McBride's case, because of the newspaper that he works for.
Partly, yes.
Right. Now, this article, which you described to my learned friend as a typical left-wing rubbish, have you any evidence that what it says is not, in fact, absolutely true?
With respect, if you
yes
believe that...
or no?
Not personally, no.
Thank you. One final point, Inspector. I'd like to get it quite clear in my mind, this chain of logical deduction which has led you to the conclusion that my client is a Polish spy. Now, what you are saying is that he has, from time to time, met and talked to his employer, a man called Upton.
That's right.
And this Upton telephoned a number in Gypsy Hill and left a message on an answering machine for a man called Chris.
Correct.
But you suspect this Chris is really a Polish spy called Andrzej.
Yes.
Therefore, my client is a Polish spy.
That's one indicator,
That is
yes.
brilliant, Inspector. Absolutely brilliant.
Are you Dr. Harold Pascoe of Swans Way, Brierley Hill, Fulchester? And are you the director of the Huckstone Edge Research Centre?
That's right.
Doctor, can I ask you first of all about your professional qualifications?
Yes. I'm a doctor of medicine. I have a degree in psychology from Manchester University. And I've also studied at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal and at Harvard University.
Do you recognize the defendant, Robert McBride?
Yes.
Will you tell us how you came to meet him?
He called at my house one evening in July last year, without an appointment, incidentally. He represented himself as a journalist. He didn't say for which publication. I imagine he was freelance. He said he was researching an article on recent developments in behavioural psychology. He'd clearly done a bit of reading on the subject, and we talked generally for a little while. I referred him to one or two books and articles he might look at. Then he started to ask me about my work at the centre. I said I was not at liberty to discuss it. My work is highly classified. But he kept on. And in the end, I had to be quite rude to him and virtually throw him out of the house.
Can you remember the sort of questions he was asking?
Yes. He wanted to know if I was running experiments in what he called non-violent coercion. I said, what did he mean by that? And he said he was talking about techniques that could be used to elicit cooperation in unwilling subjects. To put it crudely, he was suggesting that my work involves developing effective methods of interrogation without the use or threat of physical violence.
Is that true?
Quite untrue.
Did you tell McBride that his suggestions were false?
No, I simply refused to discuss it. It's a ridiculous question anyway. It's like asking, have you stopped beating your patients?
After McBride left, did you do anything more about it?
Yes. The following morning, I mentioned his visit to our security officer at the centre. He said I should leave the matter with him. He would look into it. And as far as I was concerned, that was the end of it.
Now, Dr. Pascoe, I'd like you to look at this article. Exhibit 1, please.
Yes, I've seen it.
Is there any truth in the allegations that are made there?
Well, it's true that Corporal Tucker volunteered to take part in experiments at Huckstone Edge. It's also true, regrettably, that he later developed symptoms of depression, and it was granted an honourable discharge from the army. Virtually everything else is sheer invention.
Well, to put our minds at rest, Doctor, could you tell us what sort of research does go on at Huckstone Edge?
My lord, I've taken advice on this, and I can say a certain amount. I hope you won't mind if I speak in rather general terms. Not at all. The reason for pursuing the point is that both prosecution and defence in this case are concerned to establish whether it is in the public interest that your activities should be kept secret or whether they should be exposed. I understand. The Centre's main purpose is to develop techniques to measure and control symptoms of stress in members of the armed forces. Servicemen are required to cope with stressful situations as part of the job. The most stressful experience of all, and I imagine most people would agree with this, is the experience of being shot at, of being under fire. So it's not surprising we encounter a stress reaction. In the First World War, this was called shell shock. In the Second World War, it was called battle fatigue. At least we no longer associate it with any lack of courage in the person concerned. There are many other causes of stress. A soldier may be wounded, he may be physically and mentally exhausted, he may be taken prisoner. In all these circumstances, he has to be able to keep going, he has to cope. So, it's our job at the Centre to find the best ways of helping people to do that. Well, we've been looking at the problem for 5 years now, and we've looked at quite a variety of possible solutions. We've evaluated a range of drugs, tranquilizers, beta blockers, and so on. We've experimented with various techniques, meditation, biofeedback, even yoga, believe it or not. And we've run comparative tests on various forms of motivational conditioning. And the results have been very interesting. But I'm afraid they're secret.
Thank you, Doctor. Can you tell us anything about the case of Corporal Louis Tucker?
I'm afraid I can't be very helpful there. I don't myself remember Corporal Tucker from his time at the Centre. I've been involved in some correspondence on the case since that time, but my colleague, Dr. Monk, knows more about the details of it than I do.
Well, I'm sure he'll tell us all we need to know. Thank you, Doctor.
This stress control, Dr. Pascoe, you say that it is the main purpose of the Centre. What are the other purposes?
They're all subsidiary to the main area of research and derived directly or indirectly from it. For instance, we devise questionnaires and practical tests for use in the selection and training of officers. There are other projects which I'm afraid I can't talk about.
Now, these other projects, might they involve, for instance, a measure of...
I'm sorry. I cannot allow you to press the witness for classified information, Mr. Deakins.
As your lordship pleases. Dr. Pascoe, why is your work secret?
Well, the short answer is that any research work for the Minister of Defence is secret unless there's a good reason for it being made public.
But presumably, if any of these stress control techniques were ever put into operation, I mean, let us say that you decided that the entire army should meditate for 10 minutes every morning. Well, if that happened, then it wouldn't be a secret anymore, would it? Because everyone would know about it.
I imagine they would.
Yes. And I imagine that, I mean, if you made a breakthrough in stress control, well, that would be a valuable thing for the medical profession in general, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
And it wouldn't be kept a secret, would it? I mean, it would be unethical to confine a breakthrough like that purely to the armed services.
We publish our results, I'm sure we will.
So as far as your work in stress control is concerned, as distinct from these other projects, these secret projects which are so secret that I cannot even ask about them, as far as that is concerned, Dr. Pascoe, there is no great military secret.
Well, it's all secret, actually, until someone decides otherwise.
Yes, I know. But what you've told us is less secret than some of the other things.
I repeat, it's all secret.
Yes, I understand that, you see, but what I am really trying to get at is the reason for all this secrecy. You see, I don't think it's because we don't want the Russians or the Poles to know about some new form of tranquilizer. They know all about that. There is no big secret there. What I'm suggesting the reason is this. That if the British public knew what was really happening at Huckstone Edge, there would be a public outcry. Isn't that the reason?
At the risk of becoming boring, I repeat, my work is secret because it's classified as secret. As far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it.
Your experiments are conducted on volunteers, are they not?
That's right.
Do they know in advance what is going to happen to them at the centre?
Not always. It would invalidate the results if we told our subjects what to expect.
And you look for volunteers who are already suffering from stress?
No. We look for people who exhibit neither a marked sensitivity nor a marked resistance to stress.
So, you take unsuspecting people and you subject them to stress.
Well, yes.
To the point where they cannot cope with it, they cannot even handle it.
In a limited sense, yes.
Yes, right. No further questions.
The case of the Queen and Guilfoyle and McBride will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court. Robert McBride, a radical journalist, has accused the Ministry of Defence of using army volunteers as human guinea pigs for experiments in brainwashing. While he was investigating the Huckstone Edge Research Centre, a secret file went missing. That night, a laboratory technician, Joseph Guilfoyle, was arrested with McBride, who had the missing file in his pocket. Guilfoyle is charged with passing official secrets, McBride with receiving them. Both men plead not guilty.
I swear by Almighty God, the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The case you're about to see, now in its second day, is fictional, but the procedure is legally accurate. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the general public.
Are you Dr. Rosemary Kennelly of 12A Melrose Terrace, Fulchester, and are you a scientific officer at Huckstone Edge Research Centre?
Yes.
Do you recognise the defendant, Robert McBride?
Yes.
Will you tell us how and when you met him?
It was last summer. I think July. I met him through my flatmate, Heather Barton. I think she'd met him at some meeting she went to. Save the Whale or something like that. Anyway, he came back to the flat for coffee a couple of times. We got talking, and it came about like that.
Did you talk to him about your work?
A bit. I mean, I didn't want to. We're not supposed to talk about it. But if you're discussing psychology in the abstract, it was nothing specific. He was asking hypothetical questions. Would such and such a thing be possible? Could you set up a particular experiment? And I did talk in very general terms about our work at the centre. Not in detail, of course. And it was very much in confidence.
Was there no information in particular he was trying to get from you?
Well, specifically, he wanted to know about this man, Louis Tucker. I told him I knew nothing about it, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He said, well, look it up, look at the files. Well, purely out of my own curiosity, the next day I did look up the file. That evening he came round again. I told him I'd seen the file, but it was highly classified. I wasn't prepared to talk about it. He kept trying, but I stuck to my guns, and in the end he gave up.
Can I now turn to the other defendant, Joseph Guilfoyle? He worked at Huckstone Edge. Did you know him at all?
Yes, of course. He was in my section. It was I who introduced him to Bobby, to McBride.
Did you speak to Guilfoyle on October the 9th, the day of his arrest?
Yes. That was what made me wonder. He came up to me in the canteen at lunchtime and asked me where the Tucker file was kept. I said, why did he want it? He said it was his job to look out files for people who needed them. I told him Tucker was Dr. Monk's subject, and Ronnie, Dr. Monk, would have the file in his office. Well, later on, I started thinking about this, and it struck me as odd. So I asked around, and nobody I spoke to had asked Joe to look out the Tucker file. So I went along to Ronnie's office, and this would be about 5:45, and he checked and discovered the file was missing from the cabinet. So we reported what had happened to Dr. Pascoe, and he called in the security people.
Thank you, Dr. Kennelly.
You've told us that you met Robert McBride in July. When did you see him last, socially?
About the end of September.
You were friends then for just over 2 months. Were you close friends?
Reasonably close, yes.
Oh, I suggest to you that you were more than reasonably close. I suggest that you and McBride were lovers.
We had a relationship, briefly.
A sexual relationship.
A sexual relationship, yes.
May the witness be shown Exhibit 1, please. Tell me, have you seen this article before? The one headlined "Brainwashed by the British Army," the one written by my client.
Yes. I was very angry about it. I had no idea he was going to write these things.
But you forgave him.
I didn't forgive him just like that. I was very angry about it.
But you went on sleeping with him.
Yes. I was in love with him. Thought I was.
And later, when he asked you about the Tucker file, you went and looked it up.
Purely for my own information.
Wasn't it because of what my client was asking you about?
Yes. But I didn't tell him what was in the file.
Did you not say to him, and I quote the alleged words, "If your mate Louis could get his hands on that file, he could name his own figure for compensation. They would never let the case come to court"?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, words to that effect. That the file would substantiate Tucker's claim for compensation.
No.
Who ended the affair? You or McBride?
Must I answer this? He did. He went off with somebody else.
Were you upset?
Briefly, yes. Yes, I was upset.
Is that why you reported the missing file, to get your own back?
Not at all. It was my duty to report it.
But you knew that Guilfoyle had taken the file and he'd probably shown it to McBride.
I suspected that.
You didn't care whether he got into trouble for it.
It was too serious for that. I couldn't protect them. It was their own lookout if they got caught.
And you made sure that they did, didn't you?
It was my duty.
Or your revenge.
Dr. Monk, you are a research psychologist at Huckstone Edge, I believe.
That is correct.
Were you on October the 10th last requested to go to Fulchester Police Headquarters to identify certain documents?
Yes, I was.
And did you identify them?
Yes. There were papers comprising a file on a former experimental subject of mine, a Corporal Louis Tucker. It is a file that is normally kept locked in a cabinet in my office.
Is this material secret?
It is classified top secret, yes.
Can you tell us in general terms why this file is so secret?
I think so, yes. It is secret because the information it contains, or the information that could be deduced from it, would be useful in military terms to an enemy of this country. To put it simply, our research aims to make British servicemen more efficient. If our opponents know how we are going about that task, they gain a very great advantage. Suppose, to give you a hypothetical example, we found a way to make a soldier immune to the effects of solitary confinement, and that soldier is captured and interrogated by the enemy. Now, as long as the enemy doesn't know about his conditioning, they may well subject him to solitary confinement in the hope of overcoming his reluctance to talk, and they would fail. Now, suppose they already know about our wonderful breakthrough. The word goes out. If you capture a British soldier, no good putting him in solitary confinement. It doesn't work. So maybe instead they pull out his fingernails. Straight away he tells them what they want to know, and we lose the war. Now that is, as I say, a hypothetical case. But I think it illustrates the reason my research is secret. Do you know, I don't want to seem conceited or to make any exaggerated claims about the importance of this work. But if we find a way to improve the performance of a jet fighter, we keep it secret. If we find a way to improve the performance of its pilot, that too is a military secret of the utmost value to the enemy, and that is the sort of secret that would be given away if my files were made public.
Dr. Monk, rather than ask about the possible importance to the national interest of the work that you may or may not have been doing, I would like to ask you about Louis Tucker, the subject of the file that was taken from your office. Now, am I right in saying that this file is basically an account of the experiences that happened to Corporal Tucker, as he was then, from his arrival in Huckstone Edge to his departure some 3 months later?
No, not an account as such, but a chronological arrangement of notes, observations, test results, interview transcripts, that sort of thing. The information in the file would have to be interpreted, but it is complete in the sense that there are no relevant omissions.
Now, if I wanted to steal a file from your office which contained your most valuable military secret, would that be the one I should take, or should I take another one?
No, you'd be better off taking a file dealing with research methods and conclusions rather than an individual case file.
Ah. The file would not be much use to a Russian spy then. But useful, I imagine, to poor old ex-Corporal Tucker, to find out what had happened to him while he was in your hands. Tell me, was he sane when he arrived at the center?
Yes, of course.
Psychologically, no.
Well, it depends what you mean by that.
No major psychological defects.
None at all. I mean, he wouldn't have been chosen as a subject if he hadn't been in excellent health, both physically and psychologically.
And was he in excellent health when he left 3 months later?
No.
What had happened to him?
He developed a strong negative reaction to his environment.
I beg your pardon?
he developed a strong negative reaction to his environment. I felt that given time, this could be overcome and he would adjust. Unfortunately, the decision was not left up to me. He left the centre with his hostility unresolved, and as a result, he had to be discharged from the army. It was a regrettable case.
One of your failures.
Well, let's say it was not one of my successes.
Now, Dr. Pascoe had told us that one of the aims of the research at Huckstone Edge is to find out about stress. Does that involve inducing stress in your volunteers?
Under controlled conditions, yes.
Did you induce stress in Corporal Tucker?
Yes, I did.
Would you care to tell us how you did that?
Well, no. I should prefer not to go into details.
Well, let us stick to generalities then. Did you subject him to solitary confinement?
Yes, but his reactions were carefully monitored, and
Did you force him to watch violent and distressing films?
Yes, under controlled conditions.
Did you give him drugs which affect the mind?
Sir, a cup of coffee contains a drug which affects the mind. Please, let's not be melodramatic.
Oh, I'm sorry, Doctor. Let me be more specific. Did you give him injections of sodium pentothal and benzodrine?
Yes, but...
Only under carefully controlled conditions, I'm sure. Did you know that Corporal Tucker suffers from a partial loss of memory?
Of course I did know that.
He cannot remember some of the things that happened to him at Huckstone Edge.
Selective amnesia is not uncommon.
Did you wipe out part of his memory on purpose? Was that part of the so-called treatment?
We all forget things, especially unpleasant things. Part of stress control is helping people to forget certain things.
Part of stress control is helping people to forget certain things, to forget what had happened to him.
Absolutely right.
What you had done to him.
Dr. Monk, I'd like to clear up a misunderstanding. Now, you are a doctor of medicine. You are bound by the Hippocratic Oath to use your professional skills to help rather than to harm. Now, in the course of your work with Corporal Tucker at Huckstone Edge, was it your intention to help him or to harm him?
To help him, of course. I mean, the aim was to equip the man to function better as a soldier, to be more efficient, to anticipate problems that might arise and be able to cope with them. I felt that if the work had not been interrupted, this would have been achieved.
And the techniques you were using, had they been effective in other cases?
Very effective, yes.
Would they be useful to members of the armed forces in other countries?
Oh, I believe so.
Including Britain's enemies or potential enemies?
Naturally.
Thank you, Doctor. That concludes the case for the prosecution, my lord.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Mr. Deakins.
I call Robert McBride. How long have you been a professional journalist, Mr. McBride?
8 years.
And how did you come by your job on the outside?
I'd contributed 1 or 2 pieces when I was working on a local weekly paper. Then I was talking with the editor, Phil Moran, and he said they were looking for a reporter. I applied for the job and got it. That was 3 years ago.
Why did you want to work on that magazine in particular?
I suppose the main reason that it was nationally distributed. Up to then I'd only worked on local papers.
Were you influenced by its political outlook?
No, not really. I'm a socialist, I suppose. I'd rather work for a left-wing paper than something like the Daily Telegraph, but I'm not trying to start a revolution. I just think that my job as a journalist is to find out and publish the truth.
Were you aware of the fact that The Outsider is regarded as a subversive publication by the Special Branch?
Yes.
Well, you've heard Inspector Minshall's definition of subversive. Aiming to overcome the government by force. Has your magazine ever subscribed to such a policy?
Not to my knowledge. No, absolutely not.
Well, have you ever given the police any cause to regard you as a subversive?
I suppose we've done stories that have upset them. We did a thing last year about racist attitudes in the police force. We did another story about the police harassment of homeless people sleeping rough in city centres. But it's not that we're anti-police, but we are anti the abuse of power.
Now then, let me ask you about Louis Tucker. How did you first come to hear about this case?
We got a letter from a local councillor who had been trying to help Louis. He'd had a piece about it published in his local paper. He sent us the cutting, along with a copy of the letter he sent to Louis' MP, and the reply he got back. In other words, the case had been going on for some time before we got involved, but it hadn't made much progress. The difficulty was that the Ministry of Defence refused even to confirm that Louis had ever been at Huckstone Edge, because everything about the place is deadly secret. So at that stage, there wasn't really a story in it for us. This would be about March last year. The thing that made the difference, as far as I was concerned, was meeting Rosemary Kennelly. I discovered she actually worked at Huckstone Edge. She was very cagey about it to begin with, but she told me enough about the place to substantiate a lot of what Louis had already told me, and it tied in with information that had been published in America about research that had been going on over there. So on that basis, I decided to follow it up. I put various specific questions to the Ministry of Defence, and got nowhere, of course. I then went to see Dr. Pascoe, the head of the place, and put the same questions to him. The significant thing was they not only confirmed a lot of the stuff that Rosemary had told me, but on the specific allegations, he didn't deny them. He just said, in effect, no comment. So then I wrote the story, the brainwashed by the British Army piece.
Yes. Now, I'd like to ask you about that. Now, was it based on speculation, guesswork, or did you have evidence for everything that you wrote there?
No, I was very careful to distinguish between what could be actually proved and what was unsupported allegation by Louis Tucker. You'll see that I start off with an account of what Louis claimed happened to him. That's in direct quotes attributed to him, about how he was hypnotised, how he was locked in a room on his own for days at a time, how he was given drugs. That's all stuff he definitely remembered and could describe in some detail, so I was sure he wasn't making it up. There's quite a lot of other information he gave me which I wasn't so sure about, so I didn't include it. And then I go on to say that I've spoken to a research worker at Huckstone Edge, that's Dr. Kennelly, and I quote what she said about the aims and methods of the place. That quote is accurate, incidentally, where she says, I worry about whether the things we do here are ethical. We're using the same methods that they use on Soviet dissidents. The only difference is that we're using them on volunteers. She actually said that. I also quote Dr. Pascoe, and the rest of the article is background, really.
Has anything that you have since discovered caused you to modify the suspicions that you expressed in the article?
No, if anything, it didn't go far enough. A lot of the stuff in the Tucker file gave hard evidence for things that I couldn't really prove when I wrote the piece.
Mr. McBride, did you ask Joseph Guilfoyle to steal the file for you?
No, I didn't. I suggested that if he got the opportunity in the course of his work, he might take a look at the file to see if there's any way in which it could help Louis. We both agreed that it was wrong in principle that he was being denied the information he needed about his own medical history. And Joe said if he got the opportunity, he'd have a look at the file to see if it would throw any light on the case. In the event, he brought it with him. I hadn't expected that. I was very worried when I met him in the pub and he produced this file, because I was very well aware that I was under surveillance by Special Branch. That's why I'd done the whole thing so openly. I'd made no secret about my interest in the centre. I hadn't had any secret meetings or anything like that. And suddenly there's this guy handing me a great pile of classified documents. So my initial reaction was to tell him to put it back and not be so silly. And then I thought, well, since we got the thing, and from a quick glance it was obviously sensational stuff, the smart thing to do would be to photocopy it, return the originals, and then decide what to do with it. And that's what I was planning to do at the point where we were arrested.
Mm. What was your motive for pursuing this secret information?
My motive? Oh, I suppose mainly the fact that the reporter's job is to find out and publish things that the public ought to know about. But there's also the fact that Louis Tucker had obviously been very badly treated by the army, and he needed some help in fighting his case.
Do you consider that you were operating for or against the national interest?
If the national interest is supposed to be about defending democracy, then I was trying to do exactly that. The nation isn't just the government or the civil service, it's the people, and it's in their interest to know about places like Huckstone Edge. So yes, what I did was in the national interest.
Mr. McBride, you said in your article, I quote, Huckstone Edge is a centre for experiments in mind control and interrogation. Now, you've heard Dr. Pascoe say that, on the contrary, its purpose was to research the problem of stress. In the face of that, do you persist in your allegation?
Yes, I think the stress control thing is a cover story.
Do you have any qualifications in experimental psychology, any scientific credentials whatsoever?
No.
So that even if you knew all the details of all the experiments that went on at Huckstone Edge, you couldn't say with any degree of authority why this work was undertaken, could you?
I could make an intelligent guess.
But it would be quite worthless. Now, you knew even before you met Dr. Kennelly that she worked at Huckstone Edge, didn't you?
That's true.
And you pursued that relationship with the sake of the secrets you hoped to get from her.
No, I was very fond of her.
But not so fond that you wouldn't pester her for classified information. To use her own words, you wouldn't take no for an answer.
She was as concerned about the Tucker case as I was. It's just that she was in a better position to do something about it.
Well, let us take Mr. Guilfoyle. Again, you sought his acquaintanceship rather than the other way round.
Yes.
And 4 days later, he stole a secret file for you. You must be a very persuasive man, Mr. McBride.
I didn't ask him to take it. I know that's what he told the police, but that was a misunderstanding. I simply said that he should look at it if he got the chance.
Nevertheless, he took it. And you accepted it from him. Did your friend John Seymour Upton know about the progress of your inquiries at Huckstone Edge?
Of course, he was on the editorial board of the paper.
Until he fled to Ireland. Did he also know about your relationship with Dr. Kennelly?
Yes, there's no secret about that.
Now, I want you to think very carefully and give me a date. When was it that Dr. Kennelly finally refused to let you see the contents of the Tucker file?
I suppose it'd be about a fortnight after the original article, about August the 18th.
August the 18th. And we know from Inspector Minshall that on August the 23rd, John Upton phoned a contact number with the Polish intelligence service and said, "We've tried the woman and she won't cooperate." He was talking about Dr. Kennelly, wasn't he?
How should I know? I don't know anything about this phone call.
Oh, come now. The pair of you were conspiring to steal secrets and use them to discredit our armed forces.
We couldn't do that, could we, unless the secrets were discreditable ones?
Joseph Guilfoyle is accused of stealing secret documents from a government research centre and passing them to a radical journalist, Robert McBride, a man the prosecution claims was part of a communist spy ring. McBride admits he received the papers, but he says he wanted them to back up his allegations about the centre. He claims that doctors there have been working on new methods of brainwashing and psychological torture. Guilfoyle and McBride both plead not guilty.
I swear by Almighty God the evidence I give...
The case you're about to see, now in its third day, is fictional, but the procedure is legally accurate. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the general public.
Mr. Guilfoyle, how long did you work at the Huckstone Edge Research Centre?
From when it opened, about 4.5 years. Before that, I was at the university, as a lab technician, I mean, not as a student.
What were your duties at the centre?
Bit of everything, really. I had to look after the animals, rats, mice, pigeons we had occasionally, monkeys once, look after the equipment, tape recorders, film projectors, so forth.
Were you aware that the work that you were involved in was classified top secret?
Well, that was the funny thing. I wasn't at all. It was really no different from the university in that respect. I mean, I'd already signed the Official Secrets Act when I was working at the university because there were departments there that did contract research for the government. And the atmosphere at Huckstone was very similar, but only without the students. You see, there was nothing in what I was doing that needed to be classified, as far as I could see. And so I thought, well, Official Secrets Act, you sign that if you get a job as a washer-up in a remand home. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to come across any real secrets.
How did you come to meet Mr. McBride?
Through my boss, Dr. Kennelly. We were in the habit of going for a drink after work to the Lamb and Flag, and he used to come in sometimes and join us. One evening, this was October the 4th, same as I said in the statement, he came in and she wasn't with us. And I said, "Oh, she's not here tonight." And he said, "Well, never mind, it's all over, that is. Let me get you a pint." So we had a drink and got talking, and he started to tell me about this pal of his called Louis Tucker. From what I gathered, this chap Tucker had been a volunteer subject at Huckstone, and something had gone amiss with the experiments and they'd affected his brain. It was Robert's intention to help him put in for a bit of compensation, which struck me as reasonable. A couple of days later, I was talking to Dr. Kennelly. I mentioned the Tucker business. "Oh," she said, "poor old Louis Tucker. It's a pity he can't get a look at the file we've got on him. It's got the answers to everything he needs to know in there. He could put in a really good claim for compensation." So I said, "Well, why can't he have a look at it then?" And she said, "Oh, you know, red tape." And I said, "Well, I think it's a rotten shame." And she said, "I agree, but there's nothing that can be done." So I thought I'd sneak a quick look at the file, and if it'd help the fellow's case, I'd see what could be done. So I said to Dr. Kennelly, this was lunchtime of October the 9th, I said, "Where's it kept, the Tucker file?" And she said, "Why do you want to know?" And I said, "Well, it's my job to get files for people that need them, sort of tipping of the wink, if you understand me." "Oh," she said, "well, it's in Dr. Monk's office. It's the left-hand filing cabinet, top drawer. They're all in alphabetical order." So I pop along, and there it is as per specification. The trouble is, the thing runs to about 50 pages. And I thought, well, the best thing I can do is to take it home tonight, have a look at it, and put it back the same time tomorrow. So I took it home and had a look and, you know, realised it really was the answer to old Louis's problems. So I gave Robert a call and said, would he care to meet me at the pub? I just said it was about the matter we'd been discussing. And I took it to the pub and showed it to him. And he started to talk about getting it copied. Well, I wasn't very happy about that. It's one thing to use the information, but to actually make a copy of the file struck me as a bad idea. But he said it was only like as a last resort, that he wasn't going to show it to anybody. Anyway, we were still arguing about it when we came out of the pub, and there's the law waiting for us. Next thing is, we're down at the police station. They're talking about criminal charges and a possible 14-year sentence. I couldn't believe it.
Just one further point. In your written statement, you said, McBride asked me to borrow the file overnight so that he could look at it. Are you now saying that that was untrue?
Yeah. It was actually my idea to take the file. I shouldn't have signed the statement, I realise that now, but... Well, it was late, and my wife was worried about me, and I just wanted to get up for trouble and blame everything on the other fella.
Mr. Guilfoyle, how many times have you read and signed the Official Secrets Act?
3.
3.
Once, as I say, at the university, once when I got the job at Huckstone, and once when I was transferred to Dr. Kennelly's department.
Have you ever noticed a sign on the gate at Huckstone Edge that says, this is a restricted place under the Official Secrets Act?
Yes, I passed it every day.
When you took the file from Dr. Monk's office, did you notice it was stamped on the front in big red letters, top secret?
Yes.
And yet, you still insist that you were not conscious of the fact that the work at Huckstone Edge was secret.
In terms of the general atmosphere of the place, no, this is what I'm saying. The whole security thing was a bit of a joke.
To you, perhaps. When you met Mr. McBride on October the 4th, did you know what he did for a living?
Yes, I knew he was a reporter.
Did you know for which publication?
Yes, The Outsider. I'd seen the piece he'd written about the centre.
Then did it not occur to you that he might want to publish this file that you have been kind enough to present to him?
Well, quite honestly, it never occurred to me. I don't believe he would have, anyway. He wouldn't have dropped me in it deliberately to that extent.
You implied earlier that Dr. Kennerley knew that you planned to take the file from Dr. Monk's office, that she connived at the plan.
That was the impression I had, certainly.
Then let me put the question to you directly. Did she, or anyone else in authority, give you permission to take that file?
Well, she told me where it was.
And what you said to her, suggesting that you'd been asked to take the file out as part of your duties, that was a lie, wasn't it?
I suppose so.
Thank you.
Are you Dr. George Swanson of Forest Lodge, Rookley, and are you the senior consultant at the Fulchester General Hospital Psychiatric Unit?
I am.
Have you been treating a patient called Louis Tucker?
Yes.
What was your diagnosis when you first examined him?
His most obvious presenting symptom was amnesia. He had little or no coherent memory of the 3 months he'd spent at Huckstone Edge Research Centre. He complained of insomnia, nightmares, irritability, loss of concentration. I judged him to be suffering from depression, coupled with a very poor sense of identity and a general lack of self-esteem.
Have you been able to help him with these problems?
To a limited extent. A combination of chemotherapy, sleeping pills, antidepressants and so on, linked with consulting sessions and naturally group therapy sessions. All these have had some effect. But more recently, we've been tackling his amnesia by using hypnosis. You see, by trying to remember back from where he is now, the patient was getting nowhere. It was as if he was stumbling into an artificial block that had been placed in his mind. But by putting him under hypnosis, and he's a very good hypnotic subject, by the way, I've been able to take him through the experiences of his life from childhood onwards, and in this way to approach the missing section, as it were, from the other end. So, gradually, we have been able to fill in some of the gaps. And I must say, the experiences that emerged were quite shocking.
Yes, I don't want you to tell us about them. I hope that we shall hear about them from Mr. Tucker himself. But I will ask you this. In your professional opinion, are Louis Tucker's psychiatric problems caused by his experiences at Huckstone Edge?
No, not caused by them, at least greatly exacerbated by them. I couldn't put a percentage figure on it, but I've no doubt that this so-called research centre has to take the blame for the major part of this patient's difficulties.
Would it help you if your patient had access to those files relating to his time at Huckstone Edge?
Oh, absolutely. I've asked the Ministry of Defence for precisely that information. They won't even admit the man was even there. But that documentation is crucial. If I could find out exactly what has induced that patient's condition, I'd be in a far better position to undo the damage. As it is, I'm groping in the dark.
Thank you, Dr. Swanson.
Oh, Dr. Swanson, would I be right in saying that complex psychiatric problems such as you've described rarely have a single cause?
Yes, that's true. But a neurosis, which is only latent, can be triggered by a single traumatic episode.
Would I also be right in saying, forgive my layman's use of these technical terms, that depression is often accompanied by a degree of paranoia?
In some cases.
Delusions of persecution?
In some cases. I don't think it's true in this case.
Can you be positive that Mr. Tucker doesn't suffer from delusions of that kind?
I can't be positive, clearly. But I really don't think so.
But is it not possible that Mr. Tucker might have developed these symptoms even if he'd never been near Huckstone Edge?
That's possible. I just think it unlikely.
Now, again, this amnesia that you talk about, that can have many causes, can't it?
Oh, certainly.
Alcohol. A blow on the head that he might not even remember.
That's possible, but I think it unlikely.
But possible, you say. Now, this hypnotism you talk about, is that a recognized form of treatment in medical circles?
A little unorthodox, perhaps.
Experimental?
Oh, certainly. The phenomenon is still not fully understood.
Tell me, hasn't this hypnotic regression been used to send people back into their very early childhood?
That's right.
There have been cases where people have experienced being inside their mother's womb.
I believe so.
There have even been cases where people under this hypnosis have remembered, or claim to have remembered, previous reincarnations.
So I gather.
Being a Roman legionary, for example, or a Victorian housemaid, that sort of thing.
So I gather.
And how much credence would you personally give to such so-called memories, Doctor?
I would keep an open mind. But probably one would look for some kind of supporting evidence.
But you wouldn't accept it as gospel truth, just because someone claimed to have remembered it under hypnosis. It could all be an unconscious fantasy, couldn't it?
Yes, but in this
Thank you,
case...
Doctor. Oh, did the defendant McBride ever approach you to ask you about the case of Corporal Tucker?
Yes, he did, twice, in fact.
And your reply?
I refused to talk to him about it. I told him I regarded the matter as confidential.
Thank you.
Mr. Tucker, I would like you to tell us, first of all, how you were chosen to go to Huckstone Edge.
What happened was all the NCOs in the regiment got these forms to fill in. Asking all kinds of questions about what you thought about different things. What sort of dreams you had. How you felt about your mum and dad. Just went on and on. You had to tick yes or no. Or you're allowed to not answer the question no. Then after a couple of weeks, a dozen of us were sent for a medical. And after we passed that, they said, right, you 12 have been chosen for special training. Stress research training was the expression. Anyone not prepared to volunteer, take one pace forward. It was like that. We all went along with it, assuming it was liable to help with promotion in the future, so they stuck us in the coach and took us down there.
And what happened when you arrived?
Well, this is where it gets a bit vague. One time I couldn't remember anything about the place at all. When I tried to talk about it, I just came over faint, you know, hot and cold, dizzy, feeling sick. Since I've been with Dr Swanson, I got over that. It's still a bit patchy. I'll tell you what I remember anyway. First thing is, it wasn't like an ordinary barracks. It was like a corridor with sort of hotel rooms along it. And we each had our own room with a toilet and shower and everything. I remember thinking, dead cushion. Shows how wrong it can be. The first week was taken up with interviews and tests. Nobody really explained what it was all in aid of. And we were all dealt with separately. I remember one of the tests was Dr Monk had me wired up to all his machines, my pulse and breathing and everything, and gave me a rabbit. A live baby rabbit, and told me to kill it. I said, what with? He said, use your hands. It was horrible. I broke its neck, and he just said, very good, and wrote down the numbers on the machines. Then the next thing was we were each given a secret number we had to remember, and not tell anybody. Mine was 201. Then we were split into pairs, and each pair locked into a room. The idea was you had to find out the other bloke's number, but you mustn't tell him your own. If you won, you got free beer. If you lost, you had to stay in your room without food for 24 hours. Also, if you got the wrong number, if the other bloke lied to you and you believed him, then he'd won. Sounds like a party game, doesn't it? But it could get really frightening. Some blokes came out of it black and blue, teeth missing and all sorts. They really knocked each other about.
And what did you do?
We cut cards for it. I won.
Go on, please. What else can you remember?
Well, then I start with injections and the hypnosis, and that's where it gets very patchy. It's like trying to remember something in a dream, you know? I remember being strapped into a chair with these clamps on it, so I couldn't turn my head. And these devices on my eyes to stop them from shutting. I had to watch these horrible films. Starting with films of animals being killed in an abattoir, and dead bodies being cut up by surgeons, and then got to films of torture and really nasty things. I don't know if it was real or if there was actors doing it, but it's pretty convincing anyway. And it just got worse and worse. And I was wired up to machines for that one as well. I don't remember how long it went on for, but I can still see those terrible pictures. They come back in nightmares.
What, did you ask the doctor to stop the films?
I don't remember. I think I was hypnotised. I don't even know if there's anyone else there in the room. I suppose there must have been. I don't know.
Do you remember any other experiments?
That made me kill a man.
If my learned friend will bear with me for a moment, I hope to show that this is not quite as unbelievable as it sounds.
Go on, Mr. Tucker.
They gave me a gun, a revolver, and told me there was this man I had to kill. He was handcuffed, standing there. I couldn't do it. So he punished me. Told me I was scum, useless, pathetic. Then they locked me in a cell. I don't remember. In the end, they took me out, they gave me the gun, I shot him. He was on the floor, dead, bleeding. He took me back to my room. It was 2 days, and then he told me. It was a blank cartridge, and the man was just play acting, imitation blood. But I didn't know, you see. I thought it was real bullets. I thought I'd murdered him.
Is there anything else that you remember?
No. Injections, lots of injections. Dr. Monk talking to me. And I couldn't stop crying, so they sent me away.
Well, how have you been since then? It's, what, 3 years now?
I'm a wreck. I can't work. I can't hold things in my mind, you see. I don't like people anymore. I can't sleep unless I knock myself out with pills, and the dreams are terrible.
Well, has anyone helped you?
Dr. Swanson. He's a good man. And Robert?
Robert McBride?
Yeah. He's tried. He's really tried to help me, and look what it's got him. I don't know. Sorry.
Mr. Tucker, did Mr. McBride ask you to gather information about Huckstone Edge or to steal documents from there?
No, it's his idea. I wouldn't ask anyone to break the law. It wouldn't be fair.
Now, these dreams of yours, you say they came to you while you were hypnotized by Dr. Swanson.
Yeah, I couldn't remember a thing. We worked on it together, and gradually it started coming back.
You say it was like trying to remember a dream. How can you be sure it wasn't just that, a dream, rather than a real experience?
Same as you know when you remember anything. You just know.
We usually have evidence for our recollections. Do you have evidence for any of this?
That's what it's all about. They won't release the evidence. Robert tried to get it for me, and he was arrested.
You say you went to Huckstone Edge with 11 other men from your regiment. Did they undergo similar experiences?
I suppose so, yes.
Have you any evidence that any of them suffered lasting damage as a result?
No. But I've not been in touch with them. As far as I know, they're still in the army.
So you're the odd one out, the exception. Which rather suggests that your misfortunes can't entirely be blamed on these experiments, whatever they were.
The others were lucky. Maybe they were tougher than me to begin with. But you can't say it's my fault that I cracked up. If they send you into a minefield and you get blown to bits, they can't say it's your fault.
Mr. Tucker, you claim to be disabled, to have a chronic medical condition, but you don't appear to me to be physically handicapped.
I never said I was.
And I presume it's a mental disorder.
That's right.
Affecting your memory and powers of concentration.
Yes.
And causing you, no doubt, to feel a good deal of resentment against those you hold to be responsible.
I hate them. I want to see them exposed, and I want to see their torture chamber closed down.
In short, Mr. Tucker, is it not true that you are not only an unreliable witness, you're also a thoroughly prejudiced witness?
Members of the jury, there are 2 charges against each of the defendants, and I suggest that you consider first the lesser charge under Section 2 of the Official Secrets Act, and ask yourselves the question, did Guilfoyle, a state employee, communicate official information to an unauthorized person? And did McBride, being an unauthorized person, receive that information? Now, if you have decided that a crime has been committed under Section 2, then you must go on to consider the more serious charge under Section 1 and form an opinion about its motives and its consequences, or rather, what the consequences would have been had the police not intervened. The crucial words are these. If any person, for any purpose prejudicial to the safety or interests of the state, obtains or communicates any sketch, plan, model, article, or note calculated to be, or which might be, useful to a foreign agent, now then, how are you to know what these men intended by their actions? Well, the law says a man may be convicted if, from the circumstances of the case, or his conduct, or his known character as proved, it appears that his purpose was prejudicial to the safety of the state. Now, the normal rule of law is, of course, that a man is presumed innocent until he's proved guilty. Under this law, a man is presumed to be acting against the interests of the state, the national interest, unless the defense can prove otherwise. It doesn't have to be a matter of certainty, but the defense does have to put up a plausible case. On the other hand, the prosecution doesn't have to be able to prove that the accused is working directly for a foreign power. It is enough to show that he has consorted or associated with anyone who has been or is reasonably suspected to have been employed by a foreign power. Will you now retire, elect a foreman to speak for you, and consider your verdict?
Please answer this question, yes or no. Are you agreed upon your verdict?
Yes.
On the charge of communicating official secrets, do you find Joseph Guilfoyle guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
On the charge of receiving official secrets, do you find Robert McBride guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
On the charge of communicating secrets prejudicial to the safety or the interests of the state, do you find Joseph Guilfoyle guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
On the charge of receiving secrets prejudicial to the safety or interests of the state, do you find Robert McBride guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Robert McBride was found guilty under Section 1 and sentenced to 12 months imprisonment. Robert McBride and Joseph Guilfoyle were found guilty under Section 2 and sentenced to 6 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years.